Remember when life in America felt manageable? When grabbing groceries, planning a vacation, or paying for a doctor's visit didn't feel like a financial threat? For decades, Americans believed they were living the most comfortable lifestyle on earth. But today, something uncomfortable is happening. Things that used to be normal in everyday American life have quietly become luxuries. And what's even more shocking is that millions of Europeans can still afford those same things, easily. This isn't about envy. It's not about politics. It's about a widening global divide that shows just how rapidly the American middle class is slipping. While Europeans still enjoy affordable public transport, healthcare without fear, and tuition that doesn't destroy their future, Americans are fighting rising prices, stagnant wages, and a system that feels increasingly stacked against them. And the differences aren't small. They're massive. So here are 10 things Europeans can still afford, but Americans simply can't anymore. And trust me, number 1 hits the hardest. So let's start with number 10, affordable public transport. Across Europe, public transportation isn't just an option, it's a lifeline. Trains run on time, trams connect entire neighborhoods, buses actually show up, and monthly passes cost less than a single tank of gas in the United States. In cities like Berlin, Lisbon, Vienna, Prague, or Paris, people rely on transit every day because it's reliable, safe, and affordable. You can commute, travel between cities, or even cross borders without draining your bank account. Meanwhile, in the US, the conversation is completely different. Most Americans have no realistic alternative to owning a car, not because they want to, but because cities were built around highways, not people. And when a car becomes a necessity, life becomes expensive. You're not just paying for the car. You're paying for gas, insurance, repairs, registration fees, parking, tolls. And none of that is optional. Public transportation in the US exists, but only as a backup plan. She's slow, inconvenient, unreliable, or simply non-existent in most places. And the few cities that do have actual transit systems, New York, Chicago, Boston, DC, are dealing with delays, aging infrastructure, overcrowding, and safety concerns that push people away from using them. And here's the brutal truth. Europeans can afford to live without a car. Americans can't. And that single factor alone drains thousands of dollars every year from US households. Europe built its cities around people. America built its cities around cars. And now the financial cost of that choice is hitting Americans harder than ever. Number 9, healthcare without financial fear. In almost every European country, from Spain to Sweden to France, healthcare is treated as a service, not a financial gamble. People show up to a doctor, get treated, and go home. No surprise bills, no fighting insurance, no checking their bank account before checking their symptoms. Healthcare is funded through taxes, meaning the average person doesn't walk away from the hospital with a $3,000 invoice for something basic. Now compare that to the United States, where healthcare is one of the biggest sources of debt and anxiety. Even insured Americans are constantly navigating deductibles, co-pays, out-of-network penalties, and bills that make no logical sense. Millions of people avoid doctors altogether, not because they're healthy, but because they're scared of the cost. If you call an ambulance in Europe, it's normal. If you call an ambulance in the US, you're wondering if you just added another $1,500 to your debt. Europeans aren't lucky. Their system was designed to protect people. Americans aren't unhealthy. They're stuck in a system that punishes them financially every time they need help. And when healthcare becomes unaffordable, life becomes unaffordable. It's that simple. Number 8, fresh groceries at reasonable prices. Walk into a supermarket in Portugal, Germany, or Italy, and you'll find fresh fruits, vegetables, dairy, meat, and bread at prices the average person can actually handle. Many European countries protect basic food items through regulations, subsidies, or price caps. Not to artificially cheapen them, but to make sure that going grocery shopping doesn't feel like a luxury. Meanwhile, in the US, grocery prices have hit levels that were unthinkable just a few years ago. Eggs, bread, chicken, beef, even basic produce. Everything costs more. And Americans feel it every single week. Inflation didn't just hit food, it crushed it. The USDA even reported the fastest grocery price increases in 40 years. European markets rely heavily on local farms, shorter supply chains, and strong consumer protections. The US, on the other hand, has allowed consolidation, long-distance shipping, corporate pricing, and regional monopolies to control the entire system. The result? Europeans can walk out of the store with bags full of fresh food for a normal price. Americans walk out with a small basket and a big receipt. And it's not slowing down. Food insecurity is growing across the US, even among working families. Number 7. Affordable college tuition. Across Europe, higher education isn't a financial death sentence. In Germany, tuition is literally free, even for international students. In France, Italy, Austria, Norway, Belgium, and many others, students pay a few $100s per year, not tens of thousands. European students worry about exams, roommates, and internships, not lifetime debt. Meanwhile, the United States has turned college into a long-term financial trap. Tuition has exploded over the last 30 years, increasing 300% faster than wages. Students take on loans they won't finish paying until their 40s or 50s. Parents drain savings. And young Americans delay marriage, kids, home ownership, and even basic independence because they're buried under student debt before their adult life even begins. Europe treats education as an investment in society. America treats education as a business. Universities in the US build luxury dorms, football stadiums, and administrative empires, and charge students for it. That's why the average American graduate leaves school with $30,000 to $100,000 in debt. Europeans graduate and start life. Americans graduate and start paying. This is one of the clearest divides between the two lifestyles, and it's only getting worse. So number 6, taking real vacations. In Europe, taking a vacation is normal. Almost every country legally requires employers to offer 4 to 6 weeks of paid vacation, and people actually use it. Families travel to other countries cheaply. Flights within Europe are affordable. Hotels and food don't require emptying your savings. Now compare that with the United States, where vacation is basically a luxury. Many Americans don't take time off at all. And not because they don't want to, but because they can't afford it. The average US worker gets no legally guaranteed vacation, and many fear requesting time off because they might lose hours, or even their job. Travel inside the US is expensive. Flights are up, hotels are pricey, gas costs more. Even a simple trip can easily run into thousands. So families skip vacations entirely, or settle for cheap, rushed, stressful alternatives. Europeans see travel as part of a healthy life. Americans see travel as something only financially secure people can do. That gap says everything. 5. Childcare and family life. If you ask European parents about childcare, you'll hear something shocking. In many places, it's affordable or even free. Countries like France, Sweden, Denmark, and Germany heavily subsidize childcare, early education, and parental leave. Families get real support from the government, paid leave, reduced fees, and structured time to bond with their child. In the US, childcare is a financial crisis. Many parents pay as much as a second mortgage just to put their kids in daycare. Some spend $1,500 to $2,000 a month per child. Others are forced to quit their jobs because childcare costs more than their salary. Parental leave? The US is one of the only developed countries with no mandatory paid maternity or paternity leave. That's why American families struggle more, burn out faster, and delay having kids altogether. Europe's message to parents: we'll help you raise your children. America's message: you're on your own, figure it out. Number 4, a balanced work-life lifestyle. Europeans don't live to work, they work to live. Most countries limit weekly hours, enforce break times, and protect workers from burnout. Sundays are quiet. Evenings are family time. People take long lunches, slow down, and prioritize their mental and physical well-being. The US is the opposite. Work culture is extreme. long hours, constant pressure, grinding schedules. Many Americans have 2 jobs just to survive. Others work 50 to 60 hours because they can't keep up with bills. They skip breaks, work weekends, and live in a constant cycle of fatigue. Europeans enjoy time off, hobbies, rest, and they still live comfortably. Americans fight to catch up financially, emotionally, and physically, and many never do. The difference isn't laziness or work ethic, it's structure. Europe built a lifestyle around people. America built one around productivity. Number 3, home ownership. In Europe, home ownership is challenging, but still within reach. People can realistically buy modest homes, condos, or apartments without signing away their financial future. There are strict laws that limit predatory lending. Mortgage terms are straightforward. Many countries cap rent increases, regulate interest rates, and force banks to operate under tighter restrictions. The result? Europeans can still imagine owning a home without drowning in debt. Now look at the United States. Home ownership, once the heart of the American dream, is now the American fantasy. Home prices have exploded beyond anything realistic for middle-class earners. In the last decade, home values jumped 40% to 70% in most states, and wages never followed. A house that sold for $180,000 in 2012 is now $380,000 or higher. And that's before insane interest rates, bidding wars, investors buying entire neighborhoods, and corporate landlords turning starter homes into rental traps. Europe fights speculation. America rewards it. That's the core difference. In Europe, foreign investors and hedge funds can't swoop in and buy thousands of homes in bulk. In the US, that Wall Street not only buys homes, it sets the prices. They turn shelter into a portfolio product, pushing families out of the market entirely, then add inflation, add insurance spikes, add property taxes that climb every year, add a construction industry that focuses on luxury homes instead of affordable ones. The result? Millions of young Americans have accepted that they will never own a house. Europeans might live in smaller spaces, but they live with security. Americans live with uncertainty, constantly calculating whether rent hikes or economic shocks will force them to move. America once sold the dream of a home with a yard, a driveway, and a stable future. Now it sells $2,500 apartments with thin walls, limited parking, and corporate landlords who raise rents because they legally can. Europe keeps housing in balance. America let housing become a business model, and now regular people pay the price. Number 2, basic living cost. For years, Americans were told that Europe was the expensive continent. High taxes, high fuel prices, strict regulations, expensive cities. But here's the uncomfortable truth nobody in America wants to hear. More and more basic living costs are actually cheaper in Europe, and the gap is getting wider every single year. When you compare what an average American family pays for rent, food, transportation, and utilities, it becomes obvious that Europe isn't more affordable because everything is cheap. It's more affordable because the essentials of life are subsidized, regulated, or protected in ways the US simply doesn't offer anymore. Start with rent. Outside of massive capitals like Paris and London, most European countries offer normal middle-class housing at prices the average American can only dream of now. In Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece, Austria, and even parts of Germany, monthly rent for a modest apartment ranges from $600 to $900. In the US, that same apartment in an average city easily hits $1,400 to $1,900, and in coastal regions, it's double that. Then there's transportation, one of the most painful cost gaps. In Europe, you don't need a car to survive. You can take affordable buses, trams, subways, and rail systems that actually work. A monthly transit pass in cities like Berlin, Madrid, Vienna, and Rome typically costs $40 to $75. In the US, if you don't live in New York or a tiny handful of cities, you're forced to own a car. A financial trap that now costs the average American over $10,000 a year between payments, insurance, maintenance, registration, and fuel. Europe gives people a choice. America gives people a bill. Even utilities and living expenses tell the same story. Yes, Europe has higher electricity prices per kilowatt, but Americans still pay more overall because their homes are significantly larger, less insulated, and less efficient. European buildings follow strict energy standards that reduce long-term costs. And then there's the hidden killer, urban convenience. In Europe, you can walk to a bakery, a market, a pharmacy, a transit stop. Everything is close. Everything is accessible. In the US, most people live in car-dependent suburbs designed around highways and parking lots. That means more fuel costs, more time wasted, more wear on the car, more money burned just to survive daily life. Europe isn't cheap, but America has become unaffordable. The US forces families to absorb costs individually, transportation, housing, food, utilities, while Europe spreads those burdens through public investment, regulation, and infrastructure. This is why Americans look at Europe and say, how do they afford that? The real question is, why can't America anymore? Number 1, retirement. Retirement in Europe is still realistic. People can step back in their 60s and actually enjoy the final decades of life. Pensions, government support, affordable health care, and lower living costs help people retire with dignity. It's not luxurious, but it's possible. Meanwhile, retirement in the US is falling apart, and everyone knows it. Millions of Americans over 60 are still working because they cannot afford to stop. Social Security checks don't cover the cost of living. Savings are nowhere near enough. Healthcare costs explode right when income disappears. Rents rise, utilities rise, taxes rise. But retirement income does not. Europe structures retirement around stability. America structures retirement around personal savings, which most people never had a fair chance to build. Inflation hit savings hard. Housing drained incomes. Medical costs drained even more. Corporations cut pensions years ago. Wages stagnated. 401ks rise and fall like a casino. The result? Americans aren't retiring. They're surviving. Europe builds a safety net. America expects people to build their own parachute, even as the plane is already crashing. The reality check America can escape. Let's strip this down to the core. Europe can still provide what the average American increasingly cannot afford: universal health care, cheap or free education, efficient public transport, stronger worker protections, and a social safety net that prevents people from falling into total financial ruin. These systems didn't appear magically. They were built during decades when Europe had strong demographics, booming industries, cheap Russian energy, and consistent economic growth. The real problem now is simple. The foundation that allowed Europe to afford all these benefits is eroding, and much faster than politicians are willing to admit. Start with demographics. Europe has one of the oldest populations on the planet. Fewer young workers plus more retirees equals a shrinking tax base, supporting an expanding welfare burden. You can't sustain generous social programs forever if your workforce keeps shrinking. And unlike the US, Europe doesn't offset this with large-scale immigration. Then there's the industrial base. Europe still enjoys the benefits of its old prosperity, but it's losing the engines that created that prosperity: manufacturing, energy-intensive industry, and advanced production. High electricity prices and dependence on imported energy make it nearly impossible for factories to stay competitive. When industry leaves, tax revenue leaves. Europe can only fund its social model as long as money is flowing in, not out. Add geopolitical dependency. Europe's stability relies heavily on US security, global trade routes, and historically cheap natural resources. That world is gone. The US is pivoting inward, global shipping is becoming unstable, and affordable energy is no longer guaranteed. Europe needs a new strategy, but it's moving painfully slow. Then there's regulation. Europe protects consumers, but it also slows down innovation. You can't build fast-growth tech giants when every new idea is buried under a mountain of approvals, so Europe ends up consuming technology built elsewhere instead of producing it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Europe can still afford life today, but it's doing it with yesterday's economic model. And that model is cracking. Europe isn't broken today, far from it. It still delivers stability, affordability, and quality of life that millions of Americans wish they had. But the warning signs are real. A shrinking workforce, a weakening industrial base, energy dependence, and slow adaptation are threatening the very system that makes Europe attractive. The question isn't whether Europe is good now, it's whether it can stay this good in the future. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to LivingWise Global, your front row seat to the shifting landscape of American life and economy.